everyone. Welcome to our stream today. Thank you all for coming and joining us for our newest program series here at Nevada Humanities at Play. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Kathleen Kuo, and I am a program manager for Nevada Humanities, which is our state's council partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So with Humanities at Play, our goal is to pair gameplay and other interactive activities with thoughtful discussions about the humanities and how they shape our everyday activities and lives. But we also really want these streaming experiences to be fun and interactive, so by all means, feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat as we stream. A couple quick notes before we get started. If you're a first-time Twitch user, welcome in. Thanks so much for braving the internet and joining us here today. I encourage you all to make a free account if you haven't, just so you can chat with us. And that's really the funnest part about Twitch. So try that out if you haven't done that before. If you aren't already following us on Twitch, I encourage you to click the purple heart button as well, and that way you can get our notifications whenever we go live. And also, if you're a new user of Twitch, we have a fun feature called a chat command, which is an exclamation point followed by a keyword. And we have a list of them that you can find in the title of our stream today, as well as in the About section on our Twitch. So today, I am thrilled to have joining me Dr. Tamara Turner. Tamara has spent 30 years studying, working with, and utilizing the healing power of music and dance across culture. As a musician, ethnomusicologist, and a cultural and medical anthropologist, she has spent the last 15 years working and living with music healing communities in North Africa who use music and dance to heal emotional and physical suffering and trauma. As a researcher, she works in arts, health, and culture to support and advocate for diverse cosmologies and modalities of healing. Tamara, I am so happy I'm here for you today and with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so fun fact for everyone. I went to graduate school at Tamara, which is where we first met, but then Tamara went on and has done the most amazing, incredible research and has traveled extensively, and I can't wait to ask her some more questions about that as we get going today. But definitely, this is someone that you should be asking lots and lots of questions of. I know that I already have a million that I can't wait to ask. So, Tamara, today we're going to be playing a game called Melatonin. I like to think of this as an extra cozy music rhythm game. It actually is it's fairly new. It came out in December of last year, 2022. Um, I know that you haven't played a ton of video games, but I personally love music rhythm games. That is a whole genre in itself, and especially Japanese arcade games. And I'm just wondering, if friends in chat have ever played any music rhythm games, feel free to share them. Some of my favorites are like Rhythm Heaven Fever, the Taiko game, Taiko no Tatsujin, where you beat on an actual like taiko drum. That's a lot of fun. Groove Coaster and Jubi are also really great. So let us know if you've played any music rhythm games today. Tamara, before we get started, I thought it would be really great for our chat to get to know you a little bit better. Usually, the way we split up our streams is that we do gameplay and casual conversation first, and then we switch to the more focused interview after. And that's what we're going to do today as well. But I thought before we get started, I'm wondering if you could tell us just a little bit more about yourself, just so people are enticed and can ask you questions as we get going. Like, could you tell us what exactly an ethnomusicologist does, or what you understand ethnomusicology to be, and also what a cultural and medical anthropologist is?
Yeah, sure. Well, it might be helpful to know a little bit about how I got started into it. It's
Yes.
all related. So, my first plan in life when I was in my late teens, early 20s was to be a composer and conductor. Especially, I hadn't seen many women in that kind of role. So, my first degree was music composition. I was a very creative kid, always writing tunes and so yeah, after my bachelor's in composition, and then kind of I wanted to explore as a composer other kinds of musical systems and musical tools. So I started researching and studying the music of West Africa first, and in the late 90s went to Ghana, and that really opened my world, really changed things, the way I thought about music, and changed kind of my focus on classical music. I had been such a seriously trained classical musician and suddenly found, wow, this is pretty fun. So yeah, that I actually didn't even know that ethnomusicology existed at that time. So that would have been like 99, something like that. And so then I went back to the States, and I took another trip later to Ireland. Again, was thinking of it as a composer and as a musician. It was just so fun to explore these other musical worlds. And then finally found out that there was this field called ethnomusicology. So to make a long story short, I eventually went to grad school. I had been working right before grad school at this company called CD Baby, which is an independent music website. This was back in the day when people were first still sending in physical CDs,
I miss
and
CDs.
yeah,
Yeah.
I still have loads. I still hang on to them. Yeah, so I was a music editor at CD Baby for about 7 years in Portland, Oregon, and started hearing a lot of North African music. And at that time, I was also playing in a Brazilian samba band, and I was really struck by these rhythmic similarities between Brazilian music and Moroccan music. So yeah, that got me really interested in doing even more deep study. Um, and I had already spent some time in Morocco. This is also before grad school. Because of this work at CD Baby, I was interested in going to Morocco and studying music culture. So I just saved up a whole bunch of money. I think I was saving for years, quit my job, rented my house, and bought a one-way ticket to Morocco.
Wow.
Was there for about a year. That was in 2008. And then finally, I actually don't remember when it was I heard the term ethnomusicology, but somehow I found the program at Tufts right around that time, and I applied and went back to get my master's in 2010, which is when I met Kathleen. So I had already been spent some time in Morocco and kind of knew what I wanted to work on as an academic coming back to the system. And at that point, I was already in my 30s, but I thought, well, this seems like the perfect match of travel, music, research. So I did my master's going back and forth between Morocco, and then when I was finishing my master's, my supervisors were saying, "Well, you should really think about a PhD." And I actually was not very sure about that. Morocco, there had already been a lot of research done on Moroccan music, and it was getting, as an academic, you have to kind of always come up with a fresh idea. So
Hmm.
that was getting kind of tough. And my advice, anyway, I happened to meet an Algerian drummer, and he said, "Well, we've got kind of a very similar thing happening in Algeria, and if you want, I can just hook you up with all these musicians." So I took him up on it. I wrote a grant, and I started going to Algeria in 2013. Didn't know what I would find. At that point, there was nothing on the internet, or very few things. There was a couple of YouTube videos, and that music there was called Diwan, Diwan. So I was searching that. Through social media, met some musicians, started talking to them, and then went, and these musicians turned up at the airport to come get me. It was quite an adventure. I didn't know any of them. It was just like, I hope they come, and and they did. And so ever since then, for the last 10 years, I've been spending a lot of time in Algeria studying these music healing ceremonies. So ethnomusicology is the study of music across cultures and music as a social practice. So a lot of times, musicologists will talk a lot about the music, but we like to say it's not about the notes themselves, but more who's playing, what kind of power structure is going on, how is music a social system.
Mm.
Across cultures, we see music as very powerful, bringing people together, separating identities. So different ethnic groups will have their kind of traditional music, for example. So music is a powerful tool and social lens of viewing the world. So ethnomusicologists blend anthropological training and methodology, and that's living in places for a long amount of time, learning the language, learning the culture, even learning how to move your body differently, how to make eye contact differently, everything that's involved in what it means to be American, let's just say for an example, as opposed to being British, what are the differences? So all of that is culture, or that's one way we can think about it. So ethnomusicologists will use an anthropological approach, and then use that lens through music as a kind of focal point. So yeah, so that was, oh, and medical anthropology. So what took me there was, for as long as I can remember, I was always interested in music's power to heal, in a very broad definition of healing. For me, music was a release, and as a kid growing up, for my stress, it was kind of a way of letting go. So I always kind of instinctively felt it to be very therapeutic,
Hmm.
and even thought about getting a degree in music therapy at one point. So the reason I personally went into medical anthropology was I kept finding myself in these music healing communities who were using music to heal, especially mental emotional challenges, so suffering, trauma, and so forth, anxiety. And so, like anthropology being the study of culture, or cultural anthropology would be the study of culture, what it means to be human, looking at culture. Medical anthropology is the study of the ideas of wellness and illness across cultures. So different cultures will have different diseases. They'll categorize things differently. They'll think about what it means to be well differently. One thing I found in Algeria that was really fascinating is the Arabic word for the mind is very similar to the word for shackles. So they see
Huh.
the mind as very limiting as opposed to opening.
Hmm.
So different cultures have really drastically different ideas a lot of times about the emotions, the mind, the self. For example, or even the body. Is the body porous or not? So, for example, again in Algeria, people think about the body in a much more porous way. So energies can soak into your body in a way. So I was super fascinated by this. And since these music healing communities I was studying in North Africa were using music and trance to heal themselves, I necessarily had to study a lot about what the health system in Algeria
Hmm.
and how Algerians think about wellness, how they think about sickness. That was integral to these ceremonies. So that's why when I introduce myself, I bring in both, because we don't necessarily always pair music with medicine or with ideas of healing physical problems. We might think, oh yeah, it's really nice, I feel better after listening to my favorite song. But there are cultures in the world that really use music as a primary form of healing. A lot of that involves community, but I can get more into those details later. Hopefully that gives a pretty good overview.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tamara, let me just say, I think that was one of the best definitions of ethnomusicology I've ever heard. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks.
You've gotten it. No, I think this is great. And yes, again, I really wanted to ask you before we started playing, just so people can know a little bit more about you and just start thinking about, music in everyday life. And like you said, it's so different across cultures, the way we use it and how it affects us. And so I'm hoping that after chatting with you today, people can, do some more critical thinking about the role of music in their lives and how it affects them. We got a bunch of. Let me just go back and read some comments in chat for you before we get started. Um, Tannhauser writes, the days when 6 disc CD changers in your car were a profound luxury. PH Dumplings, welcome in. He says, we knew of that website, CD Baby, and always wondered since website based services were still not a thing in Nepal. Burned Out Lawyer, thank you very much. She writes, Kathleen, you have found the coolest human being alive, Tamara.
Aw.
uh, and John writes, it's very weird to me that the CD is still considered an old form of being able to listen to music and play games and such. I know. I think that I hope CDs make a resurgence. I have so many. I do hope they come back. All right, Tamara, I'm going to pull up this game, which I believe you can see, but I'm going to turn up the volume now for everyone so they can hear it. All right, see if this is being captured. Okay, it should be showing up now. Great. How's the volume on your end, Tamara? Can you hear it okay? Is it too loud?
It's a little
It's a
loud.
little loud? Okay, we'll turn it down. How about now? Is this
That's
better?
better.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, so for our friends in chat, as I mentioned before, Melatonin is a relatively new game, a music rhythm game that came out at the end of last year. And It's pretty short, I think. Like I finished most of it in a night, but I love the way it looks and sounds, and I definitely recommend if you're into games. This is a great one for either PC. I have not played it on Switch, but I know you can get it on the Nintendo Switch as well. So today, what I'm going to be doing with Tamara, we'll just play a couple of levels, just so you know we can talk about music in the body, entrainment, all that good stuff, and then we'll cut to our more focused interview. Thank you, Tamara, for joining me on this journey.
Happily.
All right, let us rewatch the introduction to night one. I love this very purple aesthetic. So this is sort of the premise of the game. We are in the mind of this young man as he falls asleep and has these wild musical dreams. Okay, so we can run around. So we could dream about food, shopping, tech, or followers. I kind of think it's very funny to dream about followers and is sort of now, you know, especially that we're on Twitch and in the digital age. So I'm gonna do this one, I think. Okay, so every round comes with a practice, just so you can get the hang of the game. If you've never played a music rhythm game, this is how they get you into it. All right, so in this dream, we'll be jumping from platform to platform, and then it gives you instructions, and I just press spacebar. Okay, Tamara, I have a question for you. It's a little bit hard for me to talk while counting at the same time, so I'm doing my best, but I've noticed with a lot of these rhythm games, it's often in like threes or fours, but in your music research, you know, as you've traveled to other countries, and you said you studied other musical systems, do you find like threes and fours are very Western, or can you maybe chat about sort of like these like polyrhythms or how things are organized?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question because actually the musical traditions I've been studying are very rhythmically fascinating,
Hmm.
I think. So what will happen a lot of times is there will be, excuse me, rhythms that can be felt as both three and four at the same time.
Huh.
Or you could break it down to three and two. So
Okay.
usually musicologists will break that down to three with two or three against two. And they talk, so you can think about that as like feeling like something's a kind of split into twos or split into threes. And so this music I'm looking at in Algeria called Diwan, again, Diwan, they will use this kind of feeling. They call it a hemiola, and that's where you have this sense of like shifting between different kinds of cycles. So let me see if I can. Oh gosh, I don't know if I should try this while we're but I used to have this cool little saying that would go with it too. Like, can you hear that? Can you hear my
No.
tapping on my laptop? You
No, I,
can't. Okay, let me try this.
okay.
Can you hear that?
I think it'd be a little bit louder, but I don't want you to hit yourself too hard.
Okay, yeah, that's tricky. How maybe on the headphones? Can you hear that?
I think I have to turn myself up. Yeah, the music, I think I just have to turn your sound up. Yeah, but that's all right. I mean, I can see you hitting
Can
your
you see me
headphones.
hitting?
I can, yes.
Anyway, we can cover that. I'll just let that one go.
No, but we
It's
can.
really yeah.
Well, I was
Go ahead.
thinking, you know, because we're going to be doing some self-care exercises later, which you said might
Yeah,
involve, you know, like the body, and maybe that's where we can
sure.
carefully also try out some of these things. Yes, Anchor Oster says, "Don't hurt the guest." No, we are not going to slap herself harder. Okay, we're going to do
Right.
score mode. I know this is a little bit quiet for folks. Shoot, let me just turn up the volume just a little bit because they said they couldn't hear the
Okay.
music. I don't want to blast your ear, but okay. I hope this won't be too loud for you. You can also do on OBS. It is as loud as it can go on OBS, John. The audio is not split because we are using Zoom today. Okay, so we are now going to do this followers level, and I don't know if you planned it, but when you're talking about threes and twos, it got to the level where there were threes and twos, not at the same time, but it was a great coincidence.
Cool.
Okay, all right. Before I get started, again, because it's very hard to count and talk at the same time, Tamara, I'm wondering if you can tell us more about, what are you doing now with your research and your current work? I know you're sort of transitioning more into maybe the public realm, and I'm wondering if you can talk about that as I start the level.
Yeah, well, I went into this research because I loved the topics, music and healing and what it means to be well. I never really set out necessarily to get a PhD, but I just did it because I loved the topic. And so it kind of came down to the fact of like, I don't really see myself standing in a classroom. I liked teaching, but it wasn't what I felt like I was born to do. It was really the research that I loved. But it's pretty hard to find jobs where you're only doing research. I managed to find one place in Berlin that was a postdoc where I could just focus on my research and publishing. But again, I sort of found, like with a lot of parts of academia, the people who were reading my publications were mostly academics
Mm-hmm.
and mostly anthropologists. And to me, it started to feel like, what a shame. This is such interesting material and could actually really kind of get people thinking about mental health differently when you think about how other cultures view it. So I really started to feel like, I would much rather be out even doing policy work or something where I could be educating the public and kind of making a bigger impact than just in the academic bubble, as we sometimes say. So, not to mention, yeah, I mean, some of you may know, I mean, academia is getting harder and harder to
Mm-hmm.
find jobs. The pay is not great. The hours are very long. And at a certain point in life, it was like, you know what? I know where I want to live. I'm not willing to just keep being a nomad. So, which you have to do a lot of times in academia. So yeah, it was a very conscious move at the end of last year to kind of look at the more public space of where ideas about health could maybe help change policy and serving healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to keep talking, or you as you play?
No, no, I definitely agree with, especially I always thought that I would teach. That's sort of that was the goal, right? Like go to graduate school, get your PhD, become a professor, and just keep going, lead the next generation. But you're right that you never know who is quite reading your research.
Hmm.
And you wonder what kind of impact you're having. And I love what I'm doing with Nevada Humanities now because I feel like I get to work with so many different people of all ages and backgrounds. And we still get to work with academics as well. And I see that though too with a lot of my friends who have gotten their PhDs and are trying to find jobs and are trying to sort of balance being an academic but also doing more public work. So I thought I would ask you about that, especially for people who might not know in the chat.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
I know we have at least one ethnomusicology student here, so not to scare you, but this is just sort of thinking about the realities of jobs and looking ahead. Okay,
Mm.
let's watch. Let's try this other level. Okay, Tamara, we could dream about exercise, work, money, or dating. Do you have a preference?
Oh, I think the dating one sounds kind of fun.
Okay,
Sounds colorful.
I think I was bad at this one because I think, yes, it involves an app. I've never used online dating apps.
You're not missing anything.
Okay. MPH Dumpling, who is our ethnomusicology student, says, "Thank you. Really enjoying your words, Dr. Turner." Oh.
Thanks.
Okay, so this dream only has one pattern to learn, but try to pay attention to the notes being used as they'll determine what directions you'll be swiping.
Mm.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's always. Oh. Okay, so I pressed the arrow. I don't know why we're swiping no on the robot. I think it would be very fun to date a robot or an alien.
I agree.
Can we see if they're hot? No, for Netler, this is all we get. We get Poomoji, robot, alien, or smiley face.
Nice job.
Okay. Tamara, what was it like getting your PhD? Because you went abroad, and I know that the education system there is different, right? Or the research model?
Yeah, well, I'm really happy I did in hindsight.
Hmm.
Well, it was fun. It was definitely fun at the time. I actually was looking at PhD programs all over the States, and I couldn't find one that really jumped out at me. I'm from Colorado originally. I'd been living on the West Coast for a long time in Oregon and California, and I kind of was ready for something new. After I did my master's at Tufts with Kathleen, I was kind of, yeah, I don't know. I was asking around, asking my advisors, and my main advisor at Tufts had taught in London.
Hmm.
So he told me about this sort of the program over there, and I decided to apply to King's College in London. There was a bit of a connection there because my advisor's advisor taught there. So we actually work on really similar topics. So I applied to King's College London and got a studentship, and so that was kind of like, well, I have to do this, because even if I never use this 20 years from now, I mean, basically I was getting money to go study music in Algeria, so why not? So yeah, I moved to London in 2013, and shortly after I had just been to Algeria for the first time. And so their PhD program, it's pretty condensed. I mean, they don't do coursework in the PhD. It's more, you do all your coursework in your master's, and then your PhD is more like a research period where you're judged, you have to submit paperwork and be approved and blah, blah, blah. But it's much more like an independent study kind of approach, you could say,
Mm-hmm.
like a kind of like independent study on steroids. And so I enjoyed it because I was already in my mid 30s by that point, and I was like, yeah, I know how to read a book, I know how to do research, I know how to write a paper. I don't need like 4 more years of being taught how to do that. So
Right.
for me, it sped things up a lot. And I was a 2 hour flight from North Africa, so that was awesome. So yeah, I'm really happy I did that. But people kept telling me at the time, like, well, the US has the best PhD programs in the world. But actually, turns out I didn't want to become a professor, so it all.
Well,
You're
and if
doing great, Kathleen.
thanks. I was going to say, in case anyone's curious, so your advisor at Tufts was Dr. Rich Jankowski. I'll type his name in chat. Um, Also, a burned out lawyer might be curious to know or interested to know. He also, I believe, got his PhD from the University of Chicago. Um, Lots of connections here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, let's try night 3. We'll do one level from each night. PH Dumpling says, that sounds intense. And by that, I think he means sort of that sort of sped up pace of doing research. He said, that sounds intense, but also as someone who loves working alone, I love how that independent study kind of approach is.
Yeah, it worked for me, but it was lonely, I will say.
Mm.
You don't have that kind of cohort feeling with an American PhD where you're with the same people for 6 to 8 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the tricky part of it. A lot, what I loved about London though is walking around the streets, I would hear at least 5 languages a day.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was like heaven. It was, yes, I mean, so much happening. Talk about theater and the symphonies, and yeah, everything was fabulous. But I also kind of knew, I'm a mountain girl growing up in Colorado. Nature is my healer, and So I was really enjoying the big city thing for a while, but now I'm in Southwest Colorado, in the mountains. So it's like, yeah, I know I'm eventually gonna have to go back to the mountains, but it was fun.
Well, I feel like maybe we'll have to do the nature map, unless you'd
Mhm.
rather do time or mind, just because now that we're
Yeah,
talking
let's do
about nature.
nature. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, let's do the practice. Okay, Tamara, what is your experience with video games? Totally okay if you say zero, but just I'm curious of every guest, sort of what you've grown up with play-wise, whether it's board games, D&D, video games. What's your sort of your experience?
Well, I'm really dating myself now, but I grew up on Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. So I was born in the 70s. And this was when video games where you would go to like the arcade, right? And you had these little levers.
Hmm.
So that I have great memories of that. And then I never really was a video game kid. But I had some friends that were into D&D.
Hmm.
I remember a bit of that growing up, especially in high school. That was a big thing when I was in high school. Lots of D&D guys. And I dated a guy who was a gamer for a while, so I was learning kind of like he was into what is it, magic,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
kind of fun. Yeah, that was fun. But yeah, I don't. I guess I'm not a huge screen person, and I felt like as an academic, I would spend at least 8 hours looking at a screen, and just feel like my eyes were crossed.
Yeah.
So I would just try to get outside. So yeah, this is all new to me, all the developments, and I mean, of course, I kind of hear about what's happening, but don't really play it myself.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think it's great that, even though, you're not like a huge game or screen time person, you still like, you've been exposed, about magic, which is more than a lot of people know. You need people who play D&D.
I even played Magic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you did. You should have
yeah,
kept those
I did.
cards. Should have kept those very, very old cards, Tamara.
I know it's probably worth a lot.
We have some comments in the chat. Burnout lawyer Tamara, she says, Tamara, I'm older than you. No shame. Um,
Yes.
PH Dumpling says, oh, the good stuff. Pac-Man was the first thing I saw my older cousin play. Parentheses, who wouldn't let me play. Yes, the hierarchy of I'm older, so it's my turn all the time. Tannhauser writes, oh yes, went to many arcades as a kid and grew up on the 8-bit NES. Tetris was a staple of that system.
Tetris. Yeah, I love Tetris.
And Angry Ostrich shares, magic is a ridiculously expensive hobby. Yes. Yes, it is. Okay, so as right before I enter score mode, Tamara, I'm wondering, have you done any research or read stuff about mental health and being outside in nature? I feel like at the beginning of the pandemic, there are all these studies about
Mm,
like Japanese forest bathing, like those kind of resurfaced.
mm.
I'm wondering if I don't know about your COVID experience, but I don't know if like being outdoors at all, in addition to music, helped sort of your mental health as we are sort of all battling these feelings of isolation and, what the heck is even happening in the world right now. So I'm gonna
Oh
start this
gosh.
level
Yeah.
and let you think about
Okay.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I went through COVID in Berlin,
Hmm.
which was a horrible place, in my
Oh
opinion,
no.
because well, I didn't have a car, and then the U-Bahn, the public transportation, was kind of difficult to use. I mean, in terms of like lots of regulations. All the hotels were closed, so
Hmm.
I couldn't go anywhere without having our own car. Couldn't travel, so basically was stuck in this city all the time. No cafes open, nowhere to actually go in the
Oh
city.
no.
It's Berlin, and it's the Berlin winter, so it's like you don't really want to be outside. At least I didn't. I'm kind like I grew up in sunny Colorado, where uh, winter is still kind of fun because you still get lots of sunshine and snow. So this was tough. It was a tough place. Very hard. I mean, plus the regulations were really, really tight in Germany.
Hmm.
So yeah, there was a lot of. I mean, people were out in the streets a lot, just trying to get out. Everybody was feeling super stir crazy. So yeah, there was a neuroscientist that I worked with a bit at the Max Planck Institute who was doing some studies on forest walking, on getting people to take walks through nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I became very conscious of my really particular background as such an outdoorsy person, growing up hiking and backpacking, and like mountains are just where I feel the best. And I don't think a lot of people in my circle really shared that in Berlin. So I
Hmm.
definitely felt like I was maybe I was sort of having a harder time than other people because that's where I go when I really need to chill out is nature.
Yeah. Um, I'm just gonna share some comments for chat, and then I'll address what you're just saying. Oh, you're talking about magic. Tannhauser. Oh no, I'm crying for you. Sorry. One of our moderators said he may or may not have had this unlimited edition card back in 1993 that is now worth $17,000 today, but he traded it away. Um,
Oh
very sad.
no.
I'm very sorry for your loss. Grand Admiral Thrawn, welcome in. Great to see you too. Okay, Tamara, let's see if we can do one more level, maybe two more, and then we'll switch to our more focused chat. But this has been, I don't know, I'm having a great time. I think this music is just super relaxing. Um,
Yeah.
so if you ever want a game to play, this would be the one for you.
Good. Yeah. Melatonin.
Okay, let's do this. Oh no, our poor protagonist. Maybe it's finals. See a lot of energy drinks. Oh no. Okay, I don't know if I want to dream about stress. The past, desires, or the future. What would you like to to dream about?
Boy, desires sound interesting. Wonder what that would be.
Yeah, you'll see it's sort of a the arcade machine, with little baubles that you open. Okay,
Oh yeah.
let's do a practice mode. The claw will make two sounds in this dream when it slides to the right. Those sounds indicate when to grab an item by holding the action key. Tamara, for your PhD, for your degree, did you have to were there any language requirements? Like I'm curious about sort of your history studying different languages.
Hmm. Let me think. I think at Tufts we had to have one extra language if I remember. Yeah, that's right. I remember. I for a while I had to get up early every morning and study French for like an hour, 1 to 2 hours every morning to catch up for the French exam. So I did because my first degrees were in classical music and I did a film scoring certificate as well. At one point, I thought, oh, I'll be a film composer. And that was fun. I used to write music for documentaries. But anyway, that's just to say that there was the whole language requirement thing happened when I began my master's. And it was a 2 year master's, so I had to catch up really fast. And I had I think like a 4 week French course ages before that. So I'm pretty good at teaching myself things. I think it's the music background. I have a really good ear. So I picked up French pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And then when I started going to North Africa, I took one Arabic course, but again, I picked it up a lot faster by ear than I could like learning how to read and write it. So then when I finally went back for my PhD, I did get a tutor, an Algerian tutor. I had taught myself how to read and write the script because I just realized I was going to have to be able to, when you're in the field, like it's great that you're just having these conversations with people, but if you need to clarify, well, how do I spell that word? I had to be able to write Arabic, and then I had to be able to read it as well. So
Yeah.
I just pounded over a summer, really learning the script, and then had a tutor in London. And then I think there was something about, I love the North African dialect of Arabic. So every Arabic country will have its own dialect, as well as there being kind of a high Arabic
Hmm.
that any Arabic speaker would be able to speak both. So that you would grow up. So the news, the Quran, anything that's kind of official Arabic language would be in classical Arabic.
Hmm.
But then every country will have kind of its own spoken Arabic, and they're very different. So I really focused on the spoken daily Arabic and didn't do a whole lot of the classical Arabic because being an anthropologist, I just basically needed to be able to have conversations with people. Didn't have to be able to read the newspaper. I wasn't doing archival work. So I love the sound of the dialect and picked it up. And actually, it turned out to be easier than French for
Oh my
me.
gosh. Wow.
Yeah, because it's like you can say so much in just a few words, and the pronunciation in the dialect I found quite a bit easier than French. French is a very technical language with a lot of
A lot of vowels.
tech, a lot of vowels and a lot of like technique with the tongue and
Uh-huh.
the mouth. I have hilarious stories about how I messed up French in the very beginning and said a lot of nasty things I didn't mean to
Oh
say.
no.
I
I
think
think
I
we've
was
all
like
been there when we've
6.
learned languages. Yes, I think.
Oh, whoops. What did I just say? Oh no. Yeah, but so yes, I did have this requirement. I mean, even just to be able to do my research, I had to at least have functional Arabic and French.
We have some comments in chat. I'll go to the earlier. So Grand Admiral Thrawn said, "Always great when language classes are super early in the day." Sarcasm. Burned out lawyer. I actually didn't consider that if you're studying the music of all these cultures, you have to understand the languages as well. It does help a lot, especially when you're doing ethnographic work, so you can talk to people. Um,
Mm.
and you must have a good ear for tones. Is the last comment. Okay, I'm going to attempt this claw game. I'm actually very bad at the claw game, but it's okay. It's okay if we don't do well at this level. PH Dumpling says, so tonality of a word gives different meanings. Yes. Um, Tamara, I'm wondering, as we play this level, I would love to learn more about sort of your experiences, like going to Algeria and Morocco, and if you would ever go back to, other countries in the region, or do you feel like it's just Algeria and Morocco? Like that's like your area of expertise, and that's like where you're sticking.
Mm. Well, I'll start with your last question
Sure.
first. Yeah, sometimes I would wonder because Algeria has gotten really hard to enter in terms of visas. So I would always have to get a cultural research visa to be able to enter, and that's become very difficult. It didn't used to be, but there have been some geopolitical things going on. So it was for those reasons I started. Excuse me, I started to think about maybe going to other places, but what I quickly remembered was how important building community and trust is if you're doing this kind of research. So it took me years to build the trust with communities to really share a lot of this information with me. Morocco, I went back and forth for probably 3 or 4 years,
Hmm.
stayed for as long as a year one time. In Algeria, I've gone 7 times
Wow.
now. And one time I was there for an entire year. Other times it's been 3 months to 6 months. And so here's a little data point that blew me away. So I've been going to Algeria for 10 years. So I've known these people for 10 years. And it was just this last summer I was there that I learned something that kind of totally shifted the way I was viewing things. And so here it's like, sometimes it just takes that long for people to
Yeah.
really share things with you. So, especially because these healing ceremonies, there's a lot of vulnerability. There's people suffering. It's not light stuff. So when I kind of remembered that, I thought, well, as much as I'd love to do research in other countries, it just takes so long that
Hmm.
in a way, it feels kind of more natural to go back to what I know and the people that I know who I miss and they miss me. And I've known them for so long. I've seen kids grow up. One kid who's like from 5 to 15, that's such a
Wow.
huge
Yeah.
change, and I'm seeing this 15-year-old kid now, like, wow. So that's amazing to be a part of people's lives for that long. And so that's also where, I mean, I'd love to go to Chad. I'd love to go to Niger and
Hmm.
study music healing in those countries. But again, I'd be starting from scratch
Yes.
and not knowing anybody, and that it just takes ages to really get to know communities. So yeah, I mean, imagine if somebody came from another country and was like, can I follow you around and just like watch you play music and like play it with you and just ask you questions constantly? And it takes a long time for
It,
like, who are you, like, get away from me.
it really does. No, I even a facial expression, I'm like, I recognize that facial expression. I've seen it on people's faces. And I know we have at least, in addition to our ethnomusicology student in chat, we also have someone else who's conducted ethnographic research in Mongolia, and I'm sure he also can probably empathize with how hard it is to establish contact and over time, and just show that you're serious about being a part of that community and learning more about the culture and language. Yes, he said, yeah, definitely. Thank you for backing me up. Burned Out Lawyer actually has a question for you, Tamara. So she asks, have you ever studied the music of a culture that you found intellectually fascinating, but it's just painful to listen to?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes. Gamelan. So Indonesia, yeah, and I'm so sorry because Kathleen might be a fan, but I never could. Like gamelan to me, like there's Balinese and Javanese
There is.
gamelan, which are like these like I mean, I hate to say this, but like kind of like xylophones, and trying to think of like if you've never heard or seen gamelan, look it up. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but so intellectually fascinating, all kinds of talk about rhythm, really cool rhythmic complexity. Yeah, mind blowing. However, for me, the sound it just like makes my brain rattle. It's kind of a higher pitch. There's kind of the like bell like, and for me it grates on my nerves, and I cannot listen, like I wouldn't listen to it to relax. I to put it mildly. Yeah, but that's a great question because there are a number of things like that. There's even, I mean, even popular music that I know, like, would be intellectually interesting, but I wouldn't listen to. Classical music as well, like some of the 1960s artists who were experimenting with everything, and like cool idea, but yeah,
Yeah.
nails on the chalkboard.
I'm not offended, Tamara. I
Okay.
so I learned I guess my first exposure to Javanese gamelan is actually at University of Chicago, where I think I took it because they did the thing where if you're taking a music class, ooh, you can get like I don't know, extra credit or like extra course credit if you sign up for our music ensemble. And this is before I knew again about what ethnomusicology was. I was just like, oh, like a music class, cool. Um, and I think it's a little bit like this game, actually. It's a little bit like Melatonin or any other rhythm game. I think it's really I enjoyed the experience of playing it, for myself, but listening from the outside was always a little bit difficult because I wasn't
Mm,
you might appreciate, my body wasn't going through with the movements, like I wasn't moving, and so I would just hear all of these sounds and rhythms, and I didn't quite it's hard to understand when you're not feeling it or doing it yourself actively. And so I understand that, and I'm not as experienced with Balinese gamelan, but if you don't play it and if you don't learn it and you just hear it for the first time, it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think. Absolutely. And
yeah.
yes, PH Dumpling says I would say that gamelan always sounded very intimidating to me personally. It's just so funny that ethnomusicology has this fascination with gamelan just because of the history of ethnomusicology. Like almost, it's like it seems like every other program has its own like gamelan in the U.S.
Yeah, there's a history to that. I remember asking about that also when I was an new ethno student, and I honestly, it has to do with geopolitics and relationships between countries. So Morocco is a big one too. That's more obvious because you can just arrive in Morocco without any kind of visa and they'll just stamp your passport. So easy
Mm,
for Westerners to get in. Their relationship with the West is very strong. Lots of histories of the hippies going there. So there are these old, so there's a reason for it, and a lot of it has to do with relationships between countries, politics. I mean, Algeria was part of the Eastern Bloc and part of communism, so they're very closed to the West. And once they kicked the French out, it was like, so it's very much harder to get into. Whereas Tunisia and Morocco, you can just kind of, I think Tunisia you can turn up without a visa as well. So there's lots of reasons for that, why people keep going to the same place. Ghana as well, for people who
mm-hmm.
want to study West African
Yep.
music. I mean, there's tons of Ghanaian ensembles. Also, English speaking, one of the few English speaking countries in West Africa, very open to tourism, very like relatively easy if you're talking in terms of visas and bureaucracy to do research. So that was, and there was a history with Java and Bali, but it probably was, relationships between colleges as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good question though. Yeah.
I'm going to do one more level, and I think let's switch to the second half of our stream. But I feel like, we're already having such a great conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did nature. Would you like time, mind, or space? These are very like
Mm.
philosophical concepts here.
How about mind?
Okay, sounds good. Oh, and PH Dumplings writes, I never thought until now how the privilege of passport shapes disciplines. Yeah, I would say absolutely, especially I think for U.S. citizens, maybe British too. I feel like it was just always easier to gain access. Like we had so many, there's like the American Center for Mongolian Studies, American Center. Like that's where a lot of
Wow.
U.S. scholars are funneled in. I'm sure other parts of the world, but yeah, I don't know what it's like for, to be from another country. So thank you for bringing that up. Grand Admiral Thrawn says, I mean, I chose to study Mongolia rather than Inner Mongolia because I can actually freely travel and research to Mongolia rather than the People's Republic of China, right? Because Inner Mongolia is in China. And then he also says, or Buryatia. Now, doing research in Russia is also impossible. So yeah, you really feel for the people who are doing research there, and yeah, things have made it complicated.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay, so this seems to be sort of like a, like a hypnotism level. This is not at all,
Mm.
related to, being hypnotized, but I think about hypnotism and trance, and I think that's a different meaning of trance. Like I think when you tell people you study, music and trance or music and ritual, they think, do you mean like trance music, like EDM? Like what do you mean by trance? And I'm wondering I'm gonna do the practice for now, but could you talk about what music and trance means, especially as it, pertain to your own research?
Yes, I could talk about music and trance all day. It's limiting myself is the challenge. So, gosh, there's a long history of anthropologists and musicologists studying music and trance. It exists all over the world in every kind of culture you can imagine, from Siberia to Africa, to the continental U.S. And so trance is a tricky word in English because
Hmm.
we use that word to contain so many subtleties, and other languages actually nuance more than English does when it comes to trance. So that's part of the problem is just the word in English. We have dissociation. That's part of the medical diagnosis system of when somebody's kind of like out of their body in a way. But
Hmm.
yeah, so that's the first thing. So in Algeria and Morocco, there in Arabic, there is no one word like trance. The French say la transe, so that's similar. But in Arabic, they'll use the French word because they don't have one word in Arabic that
Hmm.
sums it all up. They actually decipher between all of these many different kinds of trance, which are based on how it feels, which I found fascinating. So there would be trance where you sort of feel like you're traveling. So you might translate that word as traveling. Another word would get translated like to have something mount you, like to feel like
Oh,
there's something
like
riding you,
possession maybe, or
like kind of like possession. Yeah. They don't have a word for possession
Mhm.
either. They just delineate between sort of like how conscious are you of what's happening to you, and what degree can you stop it if you had to.
Mhm.
So that's how I usually talk about it in my research, is there are these kind of broad categories that are like used like categories, but they're fluid. And so over all these 10 years, I would watch people in lots of different trance states, and I learned how to tell the difference between, okay, that person's got that. And it took a long time, but you can see it in their body. You can see it in like, okay, is there some part of them conscious here? But the thing that blew me away, that challenged a lot of the anthropological research on trance and even possession, which by the way is a really I don't use the word possession because there's so
Mhm.
much baggage to it from the
Yes.
colonial background of like, oh, we think of like people foaming at the mouth, and it's like
Mm.
these really bad images. So I just use the terms that the people use themselves. I try
Okay.
not to use that. But what was I saying before that? I lost my train of thought. Anyway,
That's
so
right.
like lots and lots of varieties of this, that how they feel in the body. Um, right. I was saying in anthropology, which uses the word possession, we always had this idea that if people have that happening, that they don't know what happened to them, that they have amnesia. Well, I found in North Africa that is sometimes the case, but actually you could see people in very deep states of trance
Mm,
who then could like be directing things. So it challenged this idea of like it's an on and off switch, and that actually people learned how to move in and out of trance states very fluidly, very effectively. You even see them like directing the musicians, like somebody who's in trance, and the musicians are working the state, and yet the people are saying like, "Okay, I need more of that instrument. Give me more. Give me more. Give me more." So it's absolutely fascinating, and they've mastered this. I mean, it's like this is part of their daily practice. They can put themselves in another state of trance just with music. So there's no drugs involved whatsoever. It's a fairly religious kind of ritual. It's just this idea of entrainment, which we can get into. I hadn't touched on yet, but using the body in a particular way
mhm.
allows the brain to go into these different states. So real super fun. Yeah, really interesting stuff.
Yeah. I feel like were we in the same class? Or I remember reading this article when I was at Tufts about I think they put was it like EEGs or like something like on was it Javanese or I forget where they were. Somewhere in I want to say South or Southeast Asia to see what happened to your brain when you fell into a trance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would have been Rich Jankowski's Music in Trance
Yes.
course, probably. Yeah, yeah. The famous course. Oh, it's so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, there's always been like we've got to prove it. Like, what's happening?
Right.
Um, it's so much more than what's happening in the brain. I mean, that is like one way of looking at it, but yeah, I would never do that. I mean, the in terms of like the ethnographic anthropological approach would be like trusting that people know how to describe their own experiences in their own language, and that like what is a brainwave? I mean, it's like it's our way of trying to put our model of thinking onto other people so
Mm-hmm.
that it makes sense to us. And we have to be very careful with that. It comes out of the colonial mindset of, and just trying to get people to fit our model where I would just sit with people and talk to them, and a lot of times they wouldn't even want to talk about it. They would just basically say to me, "Show up and watch and listen." And
Mm-hmm.
you can learn a lot if you know how to observe, and you do it day in and day out and watch interactions. It's amazing what you can learn by keeping your mouth shut. So,
I think that's a lesson we can all learn. Absolutely. Um, and no, you're also right about, I always find it interesting. This is also partly why I left psychology to do, ethnomusicology, more ethnographic research, the idea of working in a lab or that
mm,
if you have, brain waves or scanners, that it's objective and it's more real than what people say about themselves. So thank
I
you for bringing
agree.
that up. Um, we have a comment in chat. It's fascinating to hear Dr. Turner's research and experience. This makes me think of how communities view the humans in connection to non humans through contacts with masks, costumes, food, etc.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Yeah, that's something we're missing so much of in American culture, in my experience. This attention to the environment, to non-human qualities, beings, just the earth, to what's are called spirits in other cultures
Mhm.
too. Yeah, I think it's a very rich way of viewing the world.
And then here it's also speculative fiction and folk tales on trance, smiley face.
Mhm,
Well, Tamara, I have just shifted. So now that it's just the two of us on screen, and I think
mhm.
it would be great to have, just a little bit more of a more focused interview now, but also saving some time for self-care exercises, which I think are great, especially, as May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I really love that we're talking about music and health and well-being today. So thank you. Um, and again, for friends in chat, feel free, if you have any questions or comments, we always love to hear them. So feel free to share away. Okay, so Tamara, you've already shared a little bit about, sort of your journey to becoming an ethnomusicologist, how you started out as a composer. And I'm wondering, do you still compose? Like, do you ever think about like writing music now, like sort of coming, I don't know if it's called coming full circle exactly, but sort of going back to where you started with composition now that you've traveled and done all these other things as well?
Yeah, I do think about it. I'm not composing at the moment. I haven't for years. I think it just became a matter of time and energy more than anything. Which is kind of a shame. And sometimes I make the joke of like this all started off because I loved making music and playing music, and then I became so into the academic thing that I had no more time or energy, which happens to a lot of people. I actually There was this joke, and I don't know if you remember this, Kathleen. Rich Jankowski used to say ethnomusicology has become no music ology, because we just stopped talking about the music, or we stopped playing music because we're all up in our heads in an academic way, which was fun for a while. But yeah, that was another reason of like wanting to use my background in another space so that I actually have time to start playing music again.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe writing a bit again. The creative expression part that I've really missed out on, by writing about other people expressing.
Tamara, do you have other creative outlets? Like, do you, I don't know, do you do any like crafting or art, or do you find, are you more sort of like, I don't know, like a hiking and just like music person? What do you do?
Yeah, the outdoors again, sports, trying to kind of burn off energy and get out of my head. I have had various chapters of my life where I got into painting,
Hmm.
and in a way, it's sort of like with the music, it became such a focus in my life that you might find this ironic, but I don't typically go and like play music just to relax, because
Hmm.
it became such like part of my life and my job that I think I'm still working on that. I'd like to get over that, but it's this thing of like when what you love becomes your job,
Hmm.
sometimes it starts to change your relationship to that thing. And I almost feel more self-conscious and judging myself more now after getting all these degrees in music, like when I hear myself play, like, oh, that sucks. Yeah,
Right.
so it's like I almost kind of stopped enjoying it in a way, and I'm trying to get over that and working through that. Like, I need to just enjoy it again. That's how this all started as a kid. So yeah, sometimes with painting, I promised myself I will never take a painting class because I don't want the same thing to happen. I'm just going to paint, and it probably sucks, but I'm just going to enjoy the process of creative expression with no judgy part of my head wondering how much it sucks. So yeah. Other than that, that's kind of yeah. I sometimes write poetry. It kind of just depends on where I'm at in life, and
I'm glad that you still
yeah.
have these, creative outlets. I totally understand about like sometimes I feel like the fear of, oh, this doesn't look good or it doesn't sound good, and you just stop. I think just getting over that and just going back to what makes you happy. Burned Out Lawyer asks, are you, she said, that's what I was going to ask about. Are you able to simply listen and enjoy music in a passive way, or do you just listen to the Carpenters?
Yeah, I do listen to music to help me relax. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's no problem. It's really more the playing myself. I keep thinking I should just join another band. Like there's this I was part of a samba band in Portland, Oregon that was really therapeutic, especially drumming, because you can really get rid of a lot of tension. So yeah, I've been thinking I need to start something like that again.
Tamara, what instruments have you played? I'm not going to ask, everyone always asks, Kathleen, what instruments are you good at? And I can't answer that, but what instruments have you played or learned? I'm curious, just like the variety, starting from, I'm imagining a typical like Western instruments all the way up to what you're doing with your research.
Mm. Well, I started off on piano when I was a kid. And then because I was studying composition, I wanted to study as many instruments as I could. I was actually, writing string quartets and orchestral music in my composition degree, so I had to know something about every instrument in a symphony
Mm.
orchestra. So I got pretty good at oboe and flute. So I was playing those in bands, and then I took some stringed instruments. So I was playing cello and viola for a while, also trying to kind of understand how stringed instruments work. Played French horn for a while, for brass, to understand the brass. I was a percussionist in my high school marching band. That was fun. Snare drum, and because that basically you couldn't march with. I was an oboe player at that point, so in marching band I became a drummer. So those were all kind of like maybe a year to 1 to 3 years of playing those. Harp, I really got into harp for a
Ooh.
while. That was kind of fun to compose for. took some organ lessons, so kind of a whole lot of classical stuff. And then when I started going to West Africa, it all kind of switched to like, oh yeah, this is way more fun. Like all kinds of shakers and rattles and different sizes of drums with different tones. And now with the North African music I study, it's actually focused around a stringed instrument that's a bit like a guitar in a way. It's the ancestor of the banjo, and it's basically a three-stringed instrument that's covered in camel skin. It's basically a piece of wood covered in camel skin. I can go get one in a second if you want.
Oh, we love show and tell. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Should I go grab it now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. One sec.
I personally love show and tell. I'm sure the chat does as well. Real girl, yes, yay horns. I never played any brass instruments myself or wind instruments, but that's because I don't have a good like lung support. But I always admire those people who could. I worked part time when I was a graduate student at the Mather Museum of World Cultures in Bloomington, Indiana. And I was doing a little bit of research on organology, which is the study of musical instruments. And I got to handle all of these really beautiful instruments from all over the world as a part of that practicum I was doing with the Mathers Museum. And I really miss that. Just being able to handle these instruments up close and just sort of wonder and look more into like what they sounded like and how they were made and how they were used. Um, PH Dumpling writes, I totally agree with what you said about we've stopped musicking. Now it's a chore to even listen to music without my brain going transcription mode. It must be the training, but I am getting better at not analyzing everything I hear, including car horns. You analyze car horns? Oh no. And yes, you were a Mathers Museum intern for a summer.
Okay. I went looking for the percussion instrument, but I'm not sure what I did with it. But so this is the stringed instrument. Just see if you can see. Oh, I should probably turn off the blur of my camera thing so you can actually see this. There we go. Okay. Okay. So it's a three-stringed instrument. So it's a box, basically. You can kind of see that, I hope.
I think
See if I
so,
can.
yes.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Hard to. It's a pretty big thing, so a little hard to show without knocking things over. Um, yeah, and then you have this kind of like dowel, this neck. So in a way, kind of like a guitar, three strings. It sort of sounds a bit like a cello, like that sort of deep bass
Hmm.
range. And you pluck it. It's actually an old kind of banjo style technique. So that's the primary instrument of the music I've been studying in North Africa now for the past 15 years.
Okay. John says that is very cool. Cheering emotes, yes.
Oh, I can see the chat now. Hooray.
Oh,
I couldn't see it before. Now I can. That's funny.
oh, yes, you can see both of us, right? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Wonderful. So yeah, PH Dumplings writes, I totally agree with what you said about how we've stopped musicking. Now it's a chore to even listen to music without my brain going transcription mode. I'm getting better at not analyzing everything I hear, including car horns. I always wondered what it would be like for people with perfect pitch, to always, especially if you studied music, to be like, oh yes, that's like an E flat to like a C or something.
Yeah, I will say it's also impaired my ability to enjoy going out to see live music.
Oh no.
Because I also, having worked at CD Baby as a music editor, my job was basically to critique and kind of judge music of, how we should think about, placing it or promoting it. And so that, yeah, it does it's hard for me to go hear music without finding myself, well, that was a little bit flat that time. And
And even I think, Tamara, I'm really glad that you've talked about colonialism a few times today, and I think about that when music transcription comes up because I'm always reminded of when I was at Tufts, my master's research was actually conducted on the Flathead Reservation in Montana, western Montana, with the Salish and Kootenai people,
Mm,
and I remember with transcribing. not everything always, and even with Javanese music as well, not everything is like a perfect, I'm just gonna say like Western E flat or like a C or like the perfect, like whatever that, 440 for your A. And I'm wondering if in your own, as you're maybe completing your dissertation or, when you had to transcribe things, if these also, ever came up, like if you're trying to notate music, but what system, like what I even what I'm trying to ask here, but sort of the systems that you use to first listen to and analyze that music, and then how you notate it. I think that says so
Mm.
much about the people who then view it and listen for themselves.
Yeah, it's really tricky. Because I've mostly been writing for academics and fellow ethnomusicologists, there were sections of my, excuse me, my dissertation that is now a book, where I did transcribe using Western notation system in order for people to kind of at least have an idea what's going on, and it's a very shallow idea for sure. As we know, it only that kind of transcription only captures an approximation of pitch, but there's so much that's lost in that transcription, like the thickness of the tone,
Mm,
harmonics, things that are just that actually there is no transcription for. So that I do kind of make a disclaimer when I use that about, okay, I'm sharing this with the sole purpose of XYZ. And so, in my book, for example, I wanted to compare several musicians across the same area and
hmm
how they were being creative with the musical material. Excuse me. So I would show that so that you could follow the motive. You could see, okay, this musician, I can see the same theme, it's the same song, but this musician has chosen to do this with it and another one has chosen to do that with it. So I used it for that purpose, just to give an example. But the idea is that I will eventually have a website for the book that then will have audio and video, so people can go listen to it, because there's really no way to transcribe the songs that does justice to it. There's
mm.
so much, like, thickness of sound is such a prioritized aesthetic that, yeah, I mean, even so, then there's other ethnomusicologists that have used these. You have to remind me, Kathleen. It's not sonograms, but it's like, where it shows the wavelength and the colors and the thickness, the
Oh gosh,
different.
it's been a while. I don't remember.
Anyway, it shows kind of like the harmonics going on.
hmm
There's a couple of, even some anthropologists that have argued, like, this is what we should all be doing. Let's all have like these spectrograms. That's it, a
That's
spectrogram,
right, like spectral
spectrograph.
analysis. Yep.
Right, right. So they're like, for example, for those of you who haven't seen it, you would have it in color and it would show you like the pitches, the harmonics, like everything that's happening in the sound wave. So then you can actually see like how thick that sound wave is. And that's cool. And it's maybe closer, you could argue, with certain kinds of music. But I think my favorite quote that I use all the time, and I can't remember who said it because it's been a long time since I've used it. I used to use it in academia a lot. Is all models are wrong, but some are useful. I thought, yes, it's true. Like, they're all wrong, but some are useful. So I think that pertains with our forms of analysis and transcription for sure. Is it's just to kind of to give you an idea of X or Y, but
Hmm.
yeah.
We Page Dumplings writes the notational system or Western analysis misses that so much. Lost in translation, quote, lost in transcription, right? And I was going to ask Tamara, what do you mean by a thick sound? Like, what makes a sound thick? And I think he answered that a little bit, but can you talk more about that, like the thickness of a sound?
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to give you a disclaimer. So I was telling Kathleen I've got this scratchy throat, so that's why I'm like downing water this whole time. So sorry for
No,
keep downing the water.
hydration is key.
Yeah.
Everyone in chat, go hydrate right now if you can. I will too.
So thickness of sound, yeah, I mean, it's a common kind of like, ethnomusicologists who work in West Africa will talk about this and publish on this. You might remember Dr. Locke, David Locke at
Yes.
Tufts wrote a bit about thickness, where, there's an aesthetic preference for, like, scratching up the sound, even in Javanese gamelan as well, where, So, for example, like if they're using a PA system, they actually like that feedback or that scratchiness that's there where you get this like to the sound. Like that's actually a preferred aesthetic in a lot of West African countries because it gives, you don't just have like the pure sound, but you have all this body there. It's quite hard to describe in words. And in the communities that I've worked with, a lot of feedback, a lot of they'll amplify it now. They didn't used to, but now it's all amplified. Even that the feedback going through the microphone where you get kind of this weird echo, they love that too. So there's just kind of this preference for a lot happening, and even sort of feedback noise, scratchy noises. There will be percussion happening at the same time as melodic motion and singing, so thickness of just like piling on the layers of sound. And my theory was that's all about getting into the body as well. I mean, you really like physically feel the sound when you're in these rituals. And I mean, we talk about listening to music, but here you're really listening inside the music. I mean, you feel your whole body vibrating like a bath, a sound bath, which is a preview for the self-care stuff. So yeah, yeah, that was really phenomenal about these traditions.
I love that. I never thought like listening to music versus listening inside music. That's gonna
Mhm.
stick with me for a little bit, especially if I listen to music in headphones. I find that I'm always amazed when I have like really good headphones and I listen to a song that I know. I'm like, how did I never pick up on, like I don't know, just how rich the bass was or some other like underlying pattern. So I'm gonna think about listening inside the music. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that too. That's not my own quote. That I got that from his name is Timothy. What's his last name? It'll come to me in a second. He's a British anthropologist. His name will come to me in a second, but he's written a lot about soundscape, talking about how obviously we're in a landscape, we're looking at it, but we're in it, and sound is the same way, and light as well. Like we don't see light, we can only see our environment because we are inside the light. The light
Mm,
is what's, yeah, we're inside it. And same with sound. The sound isn't there, we're actually, unless we're listening to like a dog barking maybe a mile away. But basically when we're listening to music like that, especially with headphones, yeah, you're part of it.
I love that. Thank you for
Tim
sharing.
Ingold, that was his name. Sorry,
Ingold?
just came. Yeah, Ingold.
Okay,
Tim
I'm gonna write
Ingold.
that in
Yeah.
chat. Tim Ingold. Burned out lawyer. It's really white wine, Tamara. Tamara, stop drinking your wine. Just kidding.
Ooh.
PH Doublings writes, this reminds me of how feeling the vibrations of the sound at a loud dance club is oftentimes different slash more enjoyable than listening through speakers or headphones. I think it depends on how loud it is. Because I know I'm definitely my brother and my father both have tinnitus, or like the ringing of the ears. And so I've always been really sensitive about how, like once the hairs in your ears die, like they don't really grow back and you lose your hearing permanently. And I was always scared that I would also develop this over time. And I haven't yet, knock on wood, but I've always been like very like sensitive to sound because of that. Tannhauser says, "Oh yes, I know all about it." Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you have it? I'm very sorry if you do. There are a lot of interesting studies on it, and I'm happy to. I don't know if you want to read economic studies, but I'm happy to share those and send them your way. Feeling the sound equals hearing the sound. Oh no, our chat is full of people. Take care of your hearing, everyone. I really think that we can't stress this enough um, in our society. Oh, Tamara, I'm so sad right now. Everyone's coming out of the woodwork saying they have hearing problems. Do you find that ever came up actually? I wonder if it's been a while, since I've sort of, I don't want to say left the field, but I haven't really read a lot of recent articles, and I wonder if people write about, music and hearing loss,
Hmm.
especially in places where there is like loud music. Like you mentioned just now about like thickness of sound that now they're amplifying it. Like, does it ever get
Hmm.
so loud? Like, what happens if someone becomes deaf or loses hearing in one of these healing communities? Like, how does that affect their ability to participate? Did you ever look into that?
Hmm. I haven't. Yeah, I don't know. I never met anybody with hearing loss problems there, and yeah, that hasn't been part of my research. But there are fields out there looking into this on disability studies as well. Hmm.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, I think let's I'm happy to shift topics now. As we sort of share our stories of illness in the chat or just having hearing impairment. Today we were chatting about again mental health and music, and you mentioned some self-care exercises, and I'm wondering. We might return to this later, about music and healing, like how that helps, like not just with emotional and mental health, also physical healing. But what are some of the self-care exercises that you've done? And are these things that we've done for a long time? Is this new? I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, well, the first one is to think of yourself as a singing bowl, and you may know like the singing bowls, and where you strike the bowl and go around the rim, and it's used a lot in yoga too for Tibetan bowls as well for getting a certain kind of tone. And I was speaking to somebody about that the other day as well. But we are also instruments. Our bodies are instruments as well, and so you can also vibrate your own body thinking in a similar way as how you would vibrate a bowl. And the idea behind it that actually comes out of what I learned in North Africa and a lot of other traditions approach it this way, is that everything is vibration. So anything that is alive is vibrating, and even inanimate things have vibration to them. So atoms are vibrating. Everything has some kind of vibrational frequency. And so does your body, and so does your emotion, and so do certain states. When you're feeling healthy or unhealthy, there's a vibration to that. So this was something that came up a lot in my research. A lot of the indigenous communities in my area, Southwest Colorado, also talk about energy and vibration. And so I think of it like that. The first thing you can do, thinking of yourself of vibrating your own body, is humming. If you think about what kind of pitch you might pick to hum, you'll feel it in your body in a different place. And if you're a singer, or if you've ever had singing lessons, you may know this too, where if you're singing high, or singing instructors will sometimes even tell you, like, get the tone up to your nasal cavity to vibrate that. But you can go lower and lower and try to vibrate with humming. Just try to get your belly vibrating. And I've honestly used that for anxiety for myself, because I get anxious a lot. And part of what got me into all this is I have a long family history of mental health challenges. So my dad's side of the family, there was a lot of depression and anxiety and even suicide. So I grew up with that, and that was very much kind of why I was saying music was my release. That's what helped me. I noticed that whenever I was anxious, I would start to hum, and I would just make up songs on the spot. When I'd be backpacking and I was worried I was going to see a bear, instead of having a bear bell, I would just sing, and that not only helped my anxiety, but I never got eaten by a bear. So yeah, so I used to try this thing myself when I was also trying to study meditation at one point, but for me, I needed something more like grounding somehow. So what I decided to do was I would spend 5 to 10 minutes a day sitting in this chair, just using a pitch, humming it, and seeing how low in my body I could make it go. Because when I would hum, let's say I'm starting to get a cold, I think, so it might be a bit lower than usual, but which is kind of like the also you might notice. I feel that pretty much in my chest. And I haven't done this in a little while, but I there was a point where I was really trying to see if I could get my belly to vibrate by varying the pitches. So that's one practice. You can sit for 5 to 10 minutes and just experience your own body vibrating using sound, using this idea of vibration and sound, to just see where you can feel the little um what's the word I'm looking for? Not twinkle. I wanted to say twinkle, like little sparkles or whatever. Little, yeah, prickles, prickles. That was the word I was looking for. See if you can get your body to vibrate. That's one self care practice that you can start with. Do you want me to keep going, or should we pause there for any questions?
Should we give people, if I don't, I realize that some of you may be at work right now. So if you're at work, I don't blame you if you can't do it. You don't want your coworkers to be like, what are they, what are they doing? But if you're able to do this, so you said just hum and just see like if you can, like where you feel it in your body, like just as low. I don't know if I can do it. Hmm. Oh, I can feel my tummy. Hmm.
Also, there's a delay in the video for me, so if you're wondering why I was dancing around there, I was responding to something you said about 5 seconds earlier.
What is time even?
Yeah.
John writes, even at work, I was humming. Hmm.
Mm.
I'm gonna think about this. Actually, Tamara, I'm wondering, earlier you were talking about bodies being porous, and I imagine, right, this is sort of what
Mm.
this exercise sort of taps into, like the idea that the body is porous. Can you actually talk a little bit more about that? Like where you've encountered um, these ideas, maybe the significance of the body being porous versus non-porous?
Yeah, wow, there's a lot of literature on this within anthropology of the body. So if anyone's interested in going down a rabbit hole, there's yeah, lots and lots of literature across medicine also. But it became important for me to think about because of the cultures I was living in, where there is a recognition of non-human agents, so spirits, and um, even what in Islam they call them jinn, and that's actually where we get the word genie, comes from the Arabic jinn, genie in the bottle. So it's a kind of, we could just call it a kind of spirit for shorthand for today. So they are known to be present all the time. It's part of Muslim belief. They exist everywhere. It's kind of like we're just living with them. Yeah, there's a lot of different cultures that have similar kinds of structures and cosmologies. So I was advised on how to protect myself, and how, like, against ones that they're like, there's good ones, there's bad ones, there's it's a whole range. But I was given all kinds of advice about just keeping myself safe in ritual and how to think about non-human agents. And so there was a couple times went to a ritual, and there were healers there that were advising me, like, well, you were sitting next to this woman and a spirit left her body and it brushed up against you, and that's why you're sick.
Oh.
And so there were ways that you could catch other people's emotions as well. So there was even discussion, even aside from the spirits, people could say, like, if somebody was really sad and was in a room, you could actually pick up that grief almost like you'd pick up a virus, which isn't that different when you think about how we talk about walking into a room and you can feel the atmosphere.
Yeah.
You can tell if, like, people are fighting and you've just walked in on something and it's like, oh well, there's like a weird feeling in this room.
Hmm.
That's what they would talk about, is like, we can take that stuff in. People talk about this with empathy too. You can take in people's energy, but it's just, I think they've thought about it a lot more, and they make it part of their healing approach. So they're really careful about energy. They will do a lot of cleansing parts of the ceremony to protect themselves from, like, let's say somebody's like really got something going on and they just want to protect themselves from that. So that's where the idea started to seep into me, and thinking about how we do pick up things in life, or other, if we're around a lot of negative people all the time, for example. So yeah, that's what got me thinking about that, and using sound even to kind of vibrate some of that stuff. That's how they would think about it, like, get that out, like, kind of, if you're feeling anxious or negative or something, you can think about vibrating whatever that is with sound, and kind of letting it bubble up, almost like bubbles in Sprite, just kind of bubbling to the top and going away.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And welcome in, Rosenheimer. Thank you so much for being here. I'm wondering, what is the second exercise that you're thinking about sharing?
Okay, so kind of expanding out from the humming thing. If for those of you that are rhythmically inclined, I mean, I will often, if I'm struggling or I just need kind of a break. Sometimes I'll go do kind of like tapping things on my chest, and sometimes some of you may know this is kind of an EMDR. They'll also do different tapping things. But being a musician, I kind of like to do rhythms, and so this might be my big moment to show you that 2 against 3 that
The
I'm working on
hemiola,
in my
yes.
head. So again, I'm seeing a delay, so I hope this comes through. But yeah, I'll show you that one. So one of my hands is going to be hitting 2 beats, and the other hand is going to be hitting 3 beats. So my right hand is doing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. It'll be the opposite for what you're seeing.
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So that's a 2 against 3, or 2 with 3, as David Locke would say from Tufts University. That exists in a lot of different cultures. So I'll do like tapping on my body, and I'll think about rhythms, or I'll hit my legs or walk around and just kind of. And for me, it's just, again, it's kind of like getting some vibration going. When I get really up in my head or get stressed or anxious or down, there's something about just kind of waking up the body again, getting into your body, breathing, trying some of these, like, find a rhythm, like even a song that if you can't think of a rhythm to play, just tap out the rhythm from a song that without, and just think of the melody in your head. Like even Smoke on the Water, you could do like
I think it's funny. I think it's harder for me to do it to my own body. Like I'm so used to doing rhythms on piano or other instruments, and so it's like, okay, if I were doing this piano, I could definitely do, two with 3. But doing it on
Mhm.
myself, for one reason, it's like I just find myself getting caught up in how my body is feeling, like the sensation of like my shirt against my fingers, and then that like throws me off guard. But I do like how when you're counting, it's kind of like when I was playing Melatonin, you just get really immersed in the feeling of the rhythm, and it's very soothing. Maybe it's easier to do on my
Yeah.
legs.
Yeah, these are kind of like, you could do these anywhere without really causing much, if you have family at home or whatever, and you don't want to make a lot of noise. These are some kind of very simple, quiet things you can do. Um, I was giving a workshop over the weekend on self-care practices also. And one thing, kind of the next level would be actually making more sound yourself. I mean, our culture is pretty quiet. We're sort of taught, to not be very loud, or even though I think Americans are kind of loud. Um, yeah, I mean, like, we don't really externalize our feelings in sound very much, and a lot of other cultures do. And so this was an idea I got, again, from North Africa, but also exists in other cultures. In North Africa, they call it the UU, and if you'll recognize, it's when the women, like, it's usually women, throwing their voice up high, and they do this kind of like guttural thing in their throat where they it kind of sounds, I mean, it's kind of an unfortunate stereotype slash cliche for Native American culture, but actually I first came across it in North Africa. I don't know if I can do this with a cold, but I will try. So no guarantees, but you might recognize it. I'm going to turn my camera off though, because I don't think you want to see my face when I do
Okay, okay,
this.
okay. Well, imagine.
Okay. So that's the UU in North Africa. But what I can't do, that I was trying to learn while I was there, is they have this way of moving their tongue where it becomes like this really cool vibration. I had my Arabic teacher try to teach me how to do this, and the little girls can do it. But I thought it was just so fun. Like, if you're feeling stressed and you can do it, like, just go do something like that. They would often use this to punctuate emotionally intense moments in
Hmm.
the culture. So for grieving, they had a particular way of doing it. For celebration, there was another kind, a slightly different tone, a slightly different approach. But I thought, what a great example of, like, using your body and sound to really externalize an emotionally powerful moment or stress or joy or suffering. So, you don't need any instrument to do that, but just your own vocal cords.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if he's still here. He may not be anymore, but Grand Admiral Thrawn, who earlier said that he studied in Mongolia, I think too of when I was there and just how music and singing was just everywhere. Like, I feel like here in the
Mm.
US, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I'm not a good singer," and so they won't sing or won't even try very hard at Happy Birthday. Or it's just like that's maybe like the only occasion where you ever sing, maybe the national anthem. But I loved how when I went there, music was so participatory and just really part of everyday life. You know, people singing in a car, people um, singing to camels and playing music for camels when they had abandoned their babies and seeing if the camels would take them back. Music as praise and for different rituals, like maybe like erecting a ger, like a home, like there would be music involved. And I
Mm.
think it made me be a less shy. I'm still a very shy singer, a very like, but a little bit less shy, I guess, when I came back because there it was, it wasn't about whether or not you feel like you're good or you have a good voice. It was just sort of the joy of participating and being a part of something, and I really miss that.
Yeah, that was my experience too. It was so integral to daily life. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to this concert or, like it was just everywhere all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Part
Yeah.
of life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, PH Dumplings, for your comment. The policing of senses is such a sad thing, and I think once we get past that conditioning of not expressing ourselves, there's much we can learn from cultures around the world. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to travel, if you can, just so you can get out of your head. Like, just because we live in the U.S. and it's around, like that's not the way it is everywhere else in the world. And I've really enjoyed that about our conversation, Tamara. Just like little phrases you've said, like listening inside music or just thinking about what other, like how can we open our minds just a little bit more to accept these other possibilities of being or
Mm.
listening or self-care. So thank you.
Oh, happily. Yeah. That's what made me fall in love with anthropology was that to me it offers other ways of experiencing the world, that it means you have more options open. So if something's not working for you about a certain way of thinking or viewing something, there are so many other ways to think about it. And it's definitely changed my life for the better, visiting more cultures and remembering, even though, okay, I'm American, so I sometimes get stuck in my ways of thinking. But even the words mental health, if you think about it, it's located at a very specific part of our bodies, and it's implying all kinds of things that have a history. The words emotions have a history, the mind has a history in science of what is the mind after all. And whereas like mental health would never translate in Arabic, for example, because that's not where health lives. That's not where an individual's health lives. It would be something more like spiritual health or community health, like how you're connected to your community is
Mm,
how healthy you are, not what are your thoughts and what are your feelings. So for me, coming from a family history of mental health challenges, that was also really helpful because I realized like I can change the way I think about this. And am I really anxious or am I not connected? Or
mm,
do I need, instead of like seeing a therapist, do I just need to like go hiking more and, or, or think about my spirituality? What is spirituality? What does that word mean to me? So yeah, if you can take anything away from this today, I think just like the ability and possibility of to opening our minds that there's so many ways of thinking about our life and experiencing our lives.
mhm. Tamara, I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm going to invite, anyone in chat to ask any last questions or share any last comments they would like to with you. Um, I have a question that I ask everyone who appears on our stream. So I'm going to ask it of you, and there is no right or wrong answer, but I am curious, what do the humanities mean to you?
Hmm. Well, the first thing that came to mind was the arts and expression and healing. Maybe that's because that's my lens, but yeah, of really thinking about our creative potential as humans, not just for, in our culture is kind of like this fun thing we do on the side, but how we can actually change policy and change what's happening in our politics and our government by thinking about human creativity and human engagement and what kind of stories we tell in terms of storytelling and the arts. I mean, the humanities really shape our experience and our knowledge of the world, how we engage with it, how we view other human beings. So I think it's absolutely central to how we live our lives.
Thank you. And not just because I work for Nevada Humanities, but that's a really nice answer. I like my goal eventually is to sort of collect all of these little snippets and add them to a video just so we can see what the humanities mean to everyone. Because I think, it's like ethnomusicology. I said I think you have one of the best answers I've ever heard, but it also means, again, very different things to very different people, or depending on who you're talking to, you'll give a different, like airplane explanation, to the person sitting next to you is like, what's ethnomusicology? You have a different answer for them.
Yep.
Okay, if there are no last questions, I guess, Tamara, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with us before we say goodbye for today? It's been just such a joy, first of all, to connect with you. I don't know. I just always enjoy our conversations, and I always learn so much. And I think everyone in chat has today as well. We've had a really wonderful chat. Thank you all for being so engaged and sharing a little bit more about yourselves with her.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun, a real pleasure. And there was one last thing I wanted to add in terms of like self-care, and some of you may already be doing this. We could kind of teasingly call it self-medicating through music. And a lot of us do this if you're feeling sad and you put on a sad song to make yourself cry to get it out. There actually is a book about that called Music in Everyday Life by Tia Denora. Kathleen probably knows it. It's on a lot of music curricula, and it she deeply studies how people actually can use music to help themselves and already do this. We already know how to do this. So I mean, I remember one day in grad school, I don't remember what was going on. This was in Tufts again, and I was super worked up about something, and I put on the Beastie Boys as loud as possible, and I just kind of went in my, and it was phenomenal, and then I was fine. And so it is this kind of like just letting stuff out, making noise, being in the music, listening inside the music, and letting it carry you. So yeah, I would recommend that book if anyone's interested in that. But I mean, we all kind of know this. It's sort of one of those things that's right in front of us, but like that can help your mental health too. Like the next time you're feeling really anxious, go find a song that really comforts you. And yeah, that's your mental health practice for the day.
Thank you so much. We have one last question. So, John says, what is your favorite instrument or the most interesting instrument you have encountered?
Most interesting instrument I've encountered?
Yes.
Gosh, I think the cuica is just popped into my mind. I think that's so cool. It's this Brazilian instrument where you pull. I think it's Brazilian. You pull out this stick and it makes this weird squeaky noise. I'm trying. It's like anyway, look it up. Cuica. I mean,
See?
who would have thought Cuica? I think that's how you spell it. Cuica. I hope I'm not wrong. It's used in a lot of Brazilian music, and you would think like, who would ever think that this would be kind of a nice sound to add? But it's actually really cool, and in the right context, it sounds, yeah, actually that kind of works for me. So yeah, you never know.
Thank you. I hope everyone has learned a new instrument today as well to carry with them. Okay, before I close out stream, I'm just going to let everyone know in chat again. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We'll be back this Thursday, May 25th at 6 p.m. Pacific with Clark County Poet Laureate Angela M. Brommel, who is fantastic, by the way, if you don't know her. Really, really good friends of our organization. We're going to be having a conversation on reading and writing for well-being. So this is ties in very much to what Tamara and I were chatting about today. So if you're interested, come on Thursday and hang out with me and Angela. We're going to be playing the first part, little bit of a game called Journey. A really, really beautiful atmospheric game. Some of the best music I've ever heard. Um, but also, a lot of people have cited this game and said that it helped them through sort of their own sort of like mental struggles or when they're feeling lonely. So that is the game that we're playing on Thursday. And of course, we have more streams planned for next week and beyond, and we'll be updating our schedule later on our website and Twitch. But everyone, thank you so much for being here. Tamara, again, I really love chatting with you.
Thank you.
I hope this won't be the last time we'll have you on our stream. I would love to have you back again in the future. But Thank you again so much. Have a wonderful day. Okay, we're going to say goodbye and take care. Try those self-care exercises, and if they make a difference, let us know what you think. Email us. Let us know what song you're going to be screaming to. Um, go take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.
Get ready to experience new adventures, new worlds, new episode Badlands. Prehistoric Planet 2 on Apple TV+.